Hello everyone, in this presentation I'm going to be talking about human-guided planning for complex manipulation tasks using the screw geometry of motion. The motivation behind this work is to perform complex manipulation tasks using human-provided demonstrations and to develop a framework that uses very few demonstrations to extract the task constraints and plan motion for a different task instance. Now, let us look at the geometric structure of a few activities that we perform in daily life. Consider the task of opening a door. The geometric constraints based on the end effector of the robot for performing this task is motion about a revolute joint, which is a constant screw constraint. You can also see the recorded end effector trajectory for manipulating a revolute joint shown to the left along with the computed screw parameters. Consider the task of opening a drawer. The geometric constraints placed on the end effector of the robot to perform this task is motion about a prismatic joint, which is a constant screw constraint. For these two tasks, irrespective of where or how the robot grasps the object for manipulation, the screw constraints remain the same. Examples of other tasks which have a constant screw constraint that we perform in our daily life are included here. Now, let us look at other tasks performed by humans in daily life by manipulating objects which are not constrained by joints. The task of scooping the contents of a bowl with a spoon is not constrained by any joint. However, the constraints placed on the spoon to perform the scooping task can be segmented into a sequence of constant screw motions. Similarly, for the task of arranging dishes, the constraints placed on the end effector of the robot to pick a plate and arrange it in the dish rack can be segmented into a sequence of constant screws. What we observe from the given examples is that, irrespective of how the task constraints are enforced, either due to the presence of joints or due to the inherent nature of the task, they can be composed as a sequence of constant screws. By extracting the constraints on the motion as a sequence of constant screws, the task can be successfully executed for variations in the position and orientation of the task-related objects. The rationale for using screw segmentation of motion is twofold and is motivated by Chesel's theorem. First, from Chesel's theorem, it can be inferred that any path in SE3 can be approximated arbitrarily closely as a sequence of constant screw motions. This is analogous to the fact that any curve in R3 can be approximated arbitrarily closely by a sequence of straight line segments. Second, the screw representation is a coordinate invariant representation, meaning that it does not depend on the choice of the coordinate frame at the end effector of the robot. The problem that we are trying to solve can be stated as, given a single demonstration of a task, segment the task space trajectory into a sequence of constant screw motions, then extract the task constraints from the demonstration, and finally perform the task using the extracted constraints. The contributions of this work include an algorithm for segmenting the sequence of poses in SE3 into a sequence of constant screw motions, and a framework which uses the extracted screw constraints to autonomously perform the task. The solution approach for the problem is explained here using the scoop and pour task as an example. For a detailed description, please refer to the paper. We first segment the demonstrated end effector trajectory as a sequence of constant screw segments, using the heuristic that the screw segments near the task-related objects form the essential task constraints. We extract the screw constraints associated with each task-related object and express them relative to the corresponding object's frame of reference. As you see in this image, we consider only the screw segments that lie inside the region of interest surrounding each task-related object to form the task constraints. Given a new task instance, we express the screw parameters extracted from the demonstrations relative to the new object poses and use screw linear interpolation between consecutive screw segments to perform the task. Using screw linear interpolation ensures that the constant screw constraints are satisfied during execution. To experimentally validate our framework, we conducted experiments with a 7-degree of freedom Baxter robot. We conducted a total of 118 experimental trials across 4 tasks. For manipulating an object constrained by a revolute joint, we conducted a total of 39 trials by varying the pose with which the robot grasps the wooden block. For this task, all 39 trials were successful. We observed that from just a single demonstration, the robot was able to perform both opening and closing of the wooden block robustly, irrespective of how it grasps the wooden block. Also, by changing the magnitude of the screw motion, we were able to perform both opening and closing of the wooden block. Similar results apply to the manipulation of a prismatic joint task. For the scooping and pouring task, we conducted a total of 16 trials by varying the pose of both the bowls. The task was executed successfully for all the trials. For the arranging dishes task, we conducted a total of 24 trials by varying the pose of the plate, the pose of the dish rack, and the slot in the dish rack into which the plate is placed. 20 of the conducted 24 trials were successful. The failures were due to the joint accuracy limits of the robot, as the robot placed the plate in the neighboring slots instead of the intended one. In conclusion, we have introduced an algorithm for screw segmentation and implemented a framework which uses the extracted screw constraints to perform tasks autonomously. Finally, we have evaluated the performance of the framework. The key novelty of our method is the combination of data with classical ideas in screw theory that exploit the natural kinematic structure of motion. We show that exploiting the structure of motion can lead to data-efficient approaches for planning using human demonstration as a guide.